They sent the obese girl to clean his barn as a joke, but the rancher refused to let her go. The boarding house kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and gossip. 7 girls crowded around the table, giggling over a notice tacked to the wall. Luke Grayson's Ranch. Help wanted. Barn cleaning. Fair pay. Fair pay, one girl snorted. For working under that devil? He threw a bucket at the last boy who worked for him, another whispered. Fired 3 men in 1 week. My brother said he's got a temper like a rattlesnake. They all knew the stories. Luke Grayson. The angry rancher. The man nobody wanted to cross. He lived alone on the edge of town, worked his land like a man possessed, and spoke to no one unless he had to. And now he needed help. Who's fool enough to take that job? One girl asked. The room fell silent. Then, slowly, all eyes turned toward the corner. Abigail sat hunched on a stool, mending a torn apron. Her hands moved carefully, stitching each hole with patience. She didn't look up. She'd learned long ago not to meet their eyes. Abigail, one girl called sweetly. Too sweetly. Abigail's hand stilled. Her stomach tightened. You're not doing anything tomorrow, are you? Abigail shook her head slowly. Perfect. The girl stood, ripping the notice off the wall. You'll go clean the rancher's barn. Abigail's throat closed. I can't. Why not? You clean here, don't you? But they say he's mean? The girl laughed. So what? You're used to mean. The others erupted in laughter. Besides, another girl added, circling closer, you're built for heavy work, aren't you? All that lifting, all that bending, more laughter. Abigail's cheeks burned. Look at her, someone whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. She can barely fit through the doorway. Imagine her trying to squeeze into that barn. Maybe she'll get stuck. Luke Grayson will have to butter the frame to get her out. The room roared. Abigail's hands trembled. She kept her eyes on the apron in her lap, stitching faster, harder, trying to disappear into the fabric. It's settled then, the first girl said, tossing the notice onto Abigail's lap. You leave at dawn. Don't be late, and don't come back until the joke's done, another added. If he throws you out, that's your problem. Abigail opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. Just the stutter that always trapped her when she was scared. The girls turned away, already moving on to the next bit of gossip, the next joke. Abigail sat alone in the corner, the notice crumpled in her shaking hands. She wanted to refuse, to say no, to stand up and walk out. But where would she go? She had no family, no money. The boarding house was all she had. And if the matron found out she'd refused work, she'd be thrown out by nightfall. So she folded the notice, tucked it into her pocket, and climbed the narrow stairs to the attic where she slept. That night, Abigail lay awake on her thin mattress, staring at the wooden beams above. The other girls' laughter echoed in her mind. Built for heavy work. Can't even fit through a doorway. She break his floorboards. The words cut deeper than any blade. She pressed her hands to her chest, feeling the rise and fall of her breath, and whispered into the dark. Why was I made this way? No answer came. Just the sound of wind rattling the shutters. Dawn broke cold and gray. Abigail dressed in her oldest work dress, tied her hair back with a fraying ribbon, and slipped out of the boarding house before the others woke. The walk to Luke Grayson's ranch took an hour. Her feet ached. Her dress clung to her in all the wrong places. By the time the ranch came into view, sweat dampened her collar despite the cool morning air. The ranch was larger than she'd imagined. Fences stretched far into the hills. Horses grazed in a distant pasture. And at the center of it all stood a barn, weathered and sturdy, its doors hanging open like a mouth. Abigail's stomach twisted. Then she heard it. A crash, loud, sharp, followed by a voice. Deep, furious. Damn useless piece of. Another crash. Abigail froze at the gate, her hand gripping the wooden post. Through the barn door, she could see him. Luke Grayson, massive, broad-shouldered. His shirt sleeves rolled up, muscles taut as he gripped a broken wagon wheel and hurled it across the barn. It smashed against the wall, splintering into pieces. He stood there, chest heaving, fists clenched, jaw tight enough to crack stone. Abigail's breath caught. This was the man they'd sent her to. The angry rancher. The devil with a temper. She wanted to turn around. To run. To disappear back into the hills. But then he turned. His eyes locked on her. Dark, hard, unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Luke spoke, his voice low and rough. "What are you doing here?" Abigail's mouth opened, but the words tangled. I was sent to clean the barn." His eyes narrowed. "Sent by who?" The boarding house. They said you needed help." Luke stared at her. His jaw worked. She could see the tension in his shoulders, the anger still simmering just beneath the surface. Then he let out a bitter laugh, short, sharp. "They sent you." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A realization. Abigail's cheeks burned. She knew what he saw. What everyone saw. Fat, clumsy, powerless. A joke. Luke turned away, running a hand through his hair. "Go home." Abigail blinked. "What?" "I said go home. I don't need help from someone they sent as a prank." Her chest tightened. She should leave. She should thank him and walk away. But then she thought of the boarding house. The laughter. The cruelty. And she thought of the matron's warning. No work, no bed. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I need the work." Luke stopped. Slowly, he turned back to face her. "You need it," he repeated. "Yes." He studied her for a long moment. Then he pointed toward a broom leaning against the barn wall. "Fine, you want to work? Then work. Don't talk. Don't complain. And stay out of my way." Abigail nodded quickly, her heart pounding. Luke turned and walked back toward the broken wagon, his boots heavy against the dirt. Abigail picked up the broom. And for the first time in her life, she didn't run from the anger. She stood in it. The barn was a mess. Dust hung thick in the air, clinging to every surface. Hay scattered across the floor like someone had thrown it in anger. Broken tools leaned against walls. A saddle lay overturned in the corner, leather cracked and neglected. Abigail gripped the broom and began sweeping. Her arms ached within minutes. The dust made her cough. Sweat dampened her forehead despite the cool morning air. But she didn't stop. Luke worked outside, hammering fence posts with brutal force. Each strike echoed across the ranch like gunfire. She could feel his anger in every blow, sharp, relentless. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Abigail's dress clung to her back. Her hands blistered around the broom handle. But slowly, the barn began to transform. The floor cleared. The hay stacked neatly. The tools organized along the wall. She worked in silence, the way she'd learned to survive. Invisible. Unheard. Midday came and went. Luke hadn't spoken to her once. Abigail paused to catch her breath, leaning against a wooden beam. Her stomach growled. She'd left the boarding house without breakfast, too afraid to face the girls. "You missed a spot." Abigail jumped, nearly dropping the broom. Luke stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright sun. His face was still hard, unreadable. He pointed toward the corner. There, straws still scattered. Abigail nodded quickly, her cheeks burning. "Sorry. I'll fix it." Luke watched her for a moment longer, then turned and walked back outside. Abigail's hands trembled as she swept the corner clean. She'd expected cruelty, expected him to throw her out like the girls predicted. But he hadn't. He was strict, cold, but not cruel, just angry at the world. By late afternoon, Abigail had finished the main floor. Her body screamed for rest. Her legs trembled, but she kept going, climbing the ladder to the loft, sweeping dust from the rafters. That's when she heard footsteps below. Luke stood at the base of the ladder, a tin cup in his hand. "Come down." Abigail descended carefully, her legs shaking on each rung. Luke held out the cup. "Drink. Water. Cool and clear." Abigail stared at it, then at him. I don't want to bother you. You're no good to me if you collapse." His voice was gruff, but something in it had softened. Just slightly. Abigail took the cup with trembling hands and drank. The water was the sweetest thing she'd tasted in days. "Thank you," she whispered. Luke grunted, then walked back toward the fence line. Abigail watched him go, the empty cup still in her hands. For the first time since arriving, her chest didn't feel quite so tight. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and deep purple. Abigail finished the loft and climbed back down. Her body ached in places she didn't know could ache. But the barn gleamed. Every corner swept. Every tool in its place. She stood in the doorway, looking at what she'd done, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. Luke appeared from the pasture, leading a horse by the reins. He tied it to the post, then glanced into the barn. His eyes swept across the clean floor, the organized tools, the neatly stacked hay. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, "You're still here. You said to work." "So I worked." Luke's jaw tightened. He stepped into the barn, his boots echoing on the swept floor. He ran his hand along the wall, checking her work. His fingers came away clean. "The girls at the boarding house," he said slowly. "They sent you here to fail." Abigail's throat tightened. She nodded. Luke turned to face her. "Why'd you stay?" I needed the work. That all?" Abigail hesitated. Then, softly, "I wanted to prove them wrong." Luke studied her. For the first time, his expression wasn't hard. It was something else. Something almost like understanding. "You did good work today," he said finally. The words hit her like a physical blow. Her eyes stung. She blinked fast, willing the tears back. Thank you." Luke nodded once, then walked toward the house. He paused at the door. "Be back at dawn." "There's more to do." Abigail's breath caught. You want me to come back?" Luke looked at her over his shoulder. "You want the work or not?" Yes, I do." "Then be here at dawn." He disappeared inside. Abigail stood alone in the barn as twilight deepened around her. Her body ached. Her hands were raw, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She wasn't a joke here. She was a worker. And for the first time in her life, someone had told her she'd done good. The walk back to the boarding house felt shorter somehow. When she arrived, the girls were gathered in the kitchen, laughing over supper. Well, one called out. "The joke's back. How long did you last? An hour? Did he throw a bucket at you?" Bet she couldn't even fit through the barn door. Abigail walked past them without a word. She climbed the stairs to the attic, washed her face in the basin, and lay down on her mattress. Let them laugh. Tomorrow she'd be back at the ranch. And the day after that. And the day after that. Because Luke Grayson hadn't laughed at her. He'd given her water. He'd told her she did good work. And in a world that had spent years tearing her down, those small kindnesses felt like the first stones of a bridge she didn't know she could cross. Outside, the stars began to appear. Abigail closed her eyes and whispered into the dark. "Thank you." Not to the girls. Not to the matron. to the angry rancher who'd let her prove she was more than a joke. And somewhere across town, in a house built by rough hands and guarded by walls of silence, Luke Grayson sat by his fireplace, staring into the flames. For the first time in years, the barn had been clean. For the first time in years, someone had worked without complaint. For the first time in years, the silence in his house didn't feel quite so heavy. He thought of the girl with the stutter and the trembling hands. The one they'd sent as a joke. The one who'd stayed anyway. And something inside him, something he'd buried deep after his father's fists and his mother's silence, began to stir. Not love, not yet, but recognition. She knew what it meant to endure. And maybe, just maybe, she was stronger than anyone gave her credit for, including herself. Dawn came soft and golden. Abigail arrived at the ranch before the sun cleared the hills. Her body still ached from yesterday's work, but she ignored it. She'd promised to be here, and she kept her promises. Luke was already awake, chopping wood near the house. His shirt clung to his back, damp with sweat despite the cool morning air. Each swing of the axe was precise, controlled, but beneath it, she could still sense the anger. Always there, always simmering. "You're early," he said without looking up. I didn't want to be late." Luke buried the axe in the stump and turned. "Barn needs mucking today. Stalls haven't been cleaned in a week." Abigail nodded. "I can do that." He studied her for a moment, then pointed toward a pair of gloves hanging by the barn door. "Use those. Work'll tear your hands up otherwise." She took the gloves, surprised by the gesture. The work was harder than sweeping. The stalls were filthy. The smell made her stomach turn. But Abigail worked steadily, pitchfork in hand, moving manure into the wheelbarrow, hauling it outside, dumping it in the compost pile. Hours passed. Luke worked nearby, repairing the fence. She could hear him muttering under his breath when a board refused to fit, cursing when a nail bent. But he didn't throw anything today. By mid-morning, 3 of the stalls were clean. Abigail paused to catch her breath, leaning against the pitchfork. Her arms trembled. Sweat dripped down her neck. That's when she heard voices. Female voices. Laughing. Abigail's stomach dropped. She stepped to the barn door and peered out. The girls from the boarding house, 4 of them, standing just outside the gate, whispering and giggling as they watched her. "Look at her," one said, loud enough to carry. "Covered in filth. Smells worse than the horses. Bet she loves it. Rolling around in the muck where she belongs. How long before Grayson sends her packing?" Abigail's cheeks burned. She stepped back into the shadows of the barn, her chest tight. They'd come to watch her fail, to laugh. Luke's voice cut through the air like a whip. "You girls got business here?" The laughter stopped. "Just checking on our friend," one called back sweetly. "Your friend's working. You're distracting her. We'll leave when we're ready." Luke set down his hammer and walked toward the gate, slowly, deliberately. The girls shifted uncomfortably. "I said," Luke repeated, voice low and dangerous, "you're distracting her. Leave. Now." One girl opened her mouth to argue. Luke's glare silenced her. They turned and walked away, whispering furiously among themselves. Abigail stood frozen in the barn, her hands shaking. He'd stood up for her. Again, Luke returned to his work without a word, as if nothing had happened. But Abigail's throat ached. That afternoon, Luke asked her to help stack hay bales in the loft. Abigail climbed the ladder, muscles screaming in protest. The bales were heavier than they looked. She gripped the first one, trying to lift it. It barely budged. She tried again, her face flushing with effort. Still nothing. Footsteps on the ladder behind her. Luke appeared, his broad frame filling the small loft space. "Here." He reached past her, gripping the bale with ease. We'll do it together." Their hands touched, just for a moment, but Abigail felt it like a spark. Luke's hands were rough, scarred, strong, but gentle. They lifted the bale together, stacking it against the wall. "Next one," Luke said. They worked side by side, moving bale after bale. The space between them grew smaller. Their shoulders brushed. Their hands touched again and again. Neither pulled away. When the last bale was stacked, Luke wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "You're stronger than you look," he said quietly. Abigail's breath caught. I'm not strong. You've worked 3 days straight without complaint." "That's stronger than most men I've hired." She looked down, her heart pounding. Luke sat on one of the bales, his shoulders sagging slightly. For the first time, he looked tired. Not angry, just tired. "My father," he said suddenly, "used to say work was the only thing that mattered. Didn't matter if you were bleeding. Didn't matter if you were sick. You worked or you were worthless." Abigail sat slowly on the bale across from him. That's cruel." He was cruel. Luke's jaw tightened. "Beat me if I didn't finish chores by sundown. Told me I'd never be more than the dirt under his boots." Abigail's chest ached. "I'm sorry." Luke shook his head. "I survived him." But the anger, it never left. Silence fell between them. Then Abigail spoke, her voice soft. "The girls at the boarding house. They've mocked me since I arrived. Called me worthless, ugly, a burden. I started to believe them." Luke looked at her. Really looked. "You're not worthless." The words were simple, but they cracked something open inside her. Tears spilled before she could stop them. Luke stood, crossed the space between them, and offered his hand. "Come on, day's not over yet." Abigail took his hand. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a joke. She felt seen. Word traveled fast in a small town. By the end of the week, everyone knew. The fat girl from the boarding house was still working at Luke Grayson's ranch. And he hadn't fired her. The saloon buzzed with gossip. Men leaned over tables, whiskey in hand, voices rising with mockery. "Grayson's keeping the joke girl. Maybe he's gone soft. Or blind. Bet she's warming his bed." Only reason he'd keep her around. Laughter erupted, cruel, loud. One man, Tom Hadley, a rancher from the north end of town, slammed his glass down. "Someone ought to ride out there. See what's really going on." 3 others agreed. By sunset, 4 men on horseback rode toward Luke Grayson's ranch. Abigail was sweeping the porch when she heard the hooves. Her stomach dropped. She knew that sound, knew what it meant. Trouble. The men reined in near the gate, grinning wide. "Well, well," Tom called out. "Heard Grayson's got himself a new maid." Abigail froze, broom in hand. Another man laughed. "Maid? That's generous. More like a circus act. How much is he paying you, sweetheart? By the pound?" The laughter cut through her like knives. Abigail's hands trembled. She wanted to run inside, to hide. But then the door behind her opened. Luke stepped onto the porch. Silent, towering, his eyes locked on the men. "You boys lost?" His voice was low, dangerous. Tom grinned. "Just checking on you, Grayson. Making sure you're all right. Heard you kept the joke the boarding house sent." Luke descended the porch steps slowly. "What I do on my land is none of your concern." "Just seems strange," another man said. "You turning down good workers for months, then keeping her. She works harder than any man you've got." Tom laughed. "Come on, Luke, look at her. You really expect us to believe." "I don't expect you to believe anything." Luke's fists clenched at his sides. "I expect you to get off my property." The men exchanged glances. "We're just having a little fun," Tom said. "Fun's over. Leave." Tom's smile faded. "You defending her honor now?" The fat girl from the boarding house? Luke stepped closer to the gate. His voice dropped even lower. You call her a joke? She's done more honest work in 1 week than the lot of you do in a month. Now get, before I make you. The threat hung in the air. Tom stared at Luke, weighing his options. Then he spat into the dirt. Your funeral. The men turned their horses and rode off, their laughter echoing behind them. Abigail stood frozen on the porch, tears streaming down her face. Luke turned back to her. You all right? She nodded, but the tears kept falling. Luke climbed the steps and stood beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Abigail whispered, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. They'll talk. They'll say terrible things about you now. Luke shrugged. Let them. I stopped caring what this town thought of me a long time ago. Abigail wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Why do you care what they say about me? Luke looked at her. His expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. Because you deserve better than their cruelty. The words shattered her. She'd spent her whole life believing she deserved exactly what she got. The mockery, the shame, the loneliness. But Luke Grayson, the angry rancher everyone feared, was telling her she deserved better. And for the first time, she believed him. Inside the house, Luke poured her water, then sat across from her at the small table. I need to tell you something, he said quietly. Abigail waited. They're not going to stop. The town, the girls. They'll keep coming. Keep talking. And it's going to get worse before it gets better. I know, Abigail whispered. If you want to leave, I'll pay you for the work you've done. No hard feelings. Abigail's heart pounded. She looked at the rough table, the simple cabin, the man who'd given her more respect in 1 week than anyone had in her entire life. I don't want to leave, she said. Luke's eyes searched hers. You sure? Yes. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Good, because I wasn't ready to let you go. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was ready to name. But something had shifted. This wasn't just about work anymore. This was about two people who'd been broken by cruelty, finding something unbreakable in each other, and no amount of town gossip could take that away. Morning came quiet. Too quiet. Abigail woke in the small room Luke had given her, sunlight streaming through the single window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory flooded back. The ranch, Luke, the men who'd come to mock her. And Luke's words, I wasn't ready to let you go. Her chest ached in the sweetest way. She dressed quickly and stepped outside. Luke was already awake, feeding the horses. He glanced at her and nodded. No words needed. Just the quiet rhythm they'd built together over the past 2 weeks. She was reaching for the water bucket when she heard it. Hooves, multiple horses. Her stomach dropped. Not again. But this time, it wasn't men from the saloon. It was the matron from the boarding house riding in a small carriage. And behind her, 3 of the girls who'd sent Abigail here as a joke. Luke set down the feed bucket, his jaw tightening. The carriage stopped just outside the gate. The matron climbed down, her face pinched with disapproval. Mr. Grayson, she called out. I've come to retrieve the girl. Luke crossed his arms. She's not going anywhere. The matron's eyes narrowed. She was sent here temporarily. I'm taking her back to the boarding house where she belongs. She belongs here. One of the girls leaned out of the carriage, smirking. Come on, Abigail. You've had your fun playing farmhand. Time to come home. Abigail's hands clenched. Home. As if the boarding house had ever been that. She's staying, Luke repeated, his voice dropping lower. The matron stepped closer to the gate. This is highly irregular. The girl has duties at the boarding house. She cannot simply abandon them to play house with you. Play house? Luke's eyes flashed. She's worked harder than anyone I've hired in 5 years. And she's earned her place here. She's a charity case, the matron snapped. And I will not have her reputation, or ours, tarnished by living unmarried with a man. The words hung in the air. Abigail's face burned. The girls in the carriage giggled. Luke was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Abigail. What do you want? Everyone stared at her. The matron. The girls. Even Luke. Abigail's heart pounded. Her mouth went dry. The stutter that always trapped her when she was afraid threatened to return. But then she looked at Luke, really looked at him. The man who'd given her water when she was thirsty, who'd stood beside her when she struggled, who'd defended her when the town mocked her, who'd told her she was stronger than she knew. And the words came, clear, steady. I want to stay. The matron's face reddened. Absolutely not. I will not allow. Luke stepped forward. You sent her here as a joke. To humiliate me. To humiliate her. But I found the only person worth keeping. Abigail's breath caught. Luke turned to her, his voice softening. You're not a joke, Abigail. You never were. And if you'll have me, I'd like you to stay. Not as a worker. As my wife. The world stopped. The girls gasped. The matron sputtered. Abigail stared at him, tears spilling down her cheeks. You want to marry me? I do, Luke said simply. If you'll have a man who's too angry and too rough around the edges. Abigail laughed through her tears. I will. Luke's face broke into the first real smile she'd ever seen from him. He crossed to the gate, opened it, and took her hand. The matron spluttered. This is outrageous. She has no dowry, no family. No, she has me, Luke said, his voice firm. And that's all she needs. He turned to the girls in the carriage. You sent her here to fail, to be laughed at. But she's the strongest person I've ever met. And I'll be damned if I let you take her back. One of the girls opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, they had nothing to say. The matron climbed back into the carriage, her face tight with fury. This is highly irregular. Highly. Good, Luke said. I was never one for regular. The carriage pulled away, the girls silent now, their joke turned on its head. Luke and Abigail stood together on the porch, his hand still holding hers. They'll talk, Abigail whispered. Let them, Luke said. I've got everything I need right here. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her gently. She melted into him, feeling safe for the first time in her life. I never thought, she whispered against his chest, that anyone would choose me. Luke tilted her chin up, his rough thumb wiping away her tears. You weren't sent here as a joke, Abigail. You were sent here so I could find you. And there, on the porch of the ranch where she'd arrived trembling and afraid, Abigail stood tall. Not as the fat girl, not as the joke, but as the woman the angry rancher refused to let go. The woman he chose. The woman he loved. And as the sun rose higher over Coldwater territory, Luke Grayson and Abigail stood together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. Because the joke was on the town, she'd saved him just as much as he'd saved her. And together, they were unbreakable. Thank you for coming this far. If this story touched your heart, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city and state in the comments below. Are you from a small town like Dusty Creek or a big city? I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. And if you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. I share new stories like this every week.